horizontal channel. I'll actually clear out this chart here. We'll actually redraw most of this stuff here just so we can have a better view here, especially if you're new to trading and new to charting. I'll kind of help you out a little bit. This is our trading view chart once again, and right here you have the volume, the RSI, the MACD, and we're going to be pulling up the Fibonacci retracement as well, and we're going to actually draw that from the top to the bottom to also get potential support and resistance levels. For those of you that don't know how to use the Fibonacci retracement, it is a mathematical indicator with some known proven math here. You can see that's the Fibonacci retracement that we're currently following right now with Bitcoin. If we take a look and zoom in, we'll draw several different important levels to watch here. Of course, we've got this overall bearish flag here that has formed since December. Somebody said still no sound. No, there's definitely sound. Crypto Jenny said we can hear you now. Somebody said no sound. What is going on? Test 1 2 3. Test. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Somebody says you get more handsome every time I view a live stream. You have sound. Robbie says I have sound. Somebody says you're getting trolled. All right. Anyways, let's go ahead and draw this out here. So this is overall flag pattern that we're watching once again. You can see if we draw it out with this new resistance, it doesn't really make sense. So we have to draw this out, the one that was forming overall. And if you see exactly what's happening here, we'll actually go ahead and make sure that looks perfectly here with these resistance lines, with that wicks on the top there. We'll zoom into the 4-hour chart. I love the 4-hour chart. It's a really good chart to really get some really good price visuals over a couple of days. Like if you're trying to plan out the next couple of days, the 4-hour chart, in my opinion, is a really powerful one. And then once you get to like the 1 hour and the 15-minute, you start getting into more of like the day trading type of chart. So really, I say that starting from the 1 day and then zooming in from there is really the best strategy for any trader, because it really gives you that overall perspective, because you want to know what the overall pattern is, and then you also want to zoom in and see a little bit more in depth of what channels are forming, what type of Elliott waves are forming, and things of that nature. Depending on what type of trader you are, there's different indicators that you can use. There's also Bollinger Bands. If we've actually never used it here, we'll start using the Bollinger Bands. You can see the Bollinger Bands as well. It really gives you an idea of when something is oversold or overbought, and it gives you an idea of when you're going to see trends going up and down, because obviously you guys know the market never just goes straight up or straight down. It typically trends up and down. So we're going to be taking a look at this price level here. You can see we found resistance right at the Fibonacci retracement here, trying to step into this yellow zone here, which is the 0.38. And once we get into that, I think that's going to go ahead and give us a little bit more of a solid depiction of where Bitcoin is going to stay over the next couple of days, because the goal is to stay above this flag at least, at minimum, because that flag right there is what's going to bring the price and pull it down, being the fact that it is a bearish flag and it's descending. So if we're staying on top of it, which it looks like we found some sort of strength here, but then we saw the overall resistance at this double top that formed here at 11,792, we'll actually draw that double top up, is really the overall strong resistance that we're facing. And once we can break through this is when I think that people should take their assets, instead of trading 40 to 50% or 30 to 50%, that's when you can start inserting 75%, 80%, 90% of your assets to be allocated into the market rather than just holding it on the side for fiat. So I think it's always good, if you're unsure of a trade or you're unsure of a trend, you want to have cash on the side, because having that cash on the side is going to give you power whenever we either hit a bottom, or if you know there's going to be some strength or upside over the next couple of days or even hours. So I think that's one of the most important things to watch. Somebody says Nightbot got jokes. Everybody's hating the Nightbot. Somebody says to the moon. So let's go ahead and take some questions from the viewers and go ahead and see where things are headed. Let's see what people have to say here. G. Lee said, gonna go to 10.3K, then drop to hell, 7 to 6K. What makes you think that, J. Lee? Somebody says, the old flag pattern is not valid anymore. BTC is forming an ascending triangle. Why are we still talking about the old flag pattern, Raphael? Well, why would you say it's not valid when we found support on the flag? So I totally disagree with that. I think the flag pattern is extremely valid. The flag pattern itself is what's been acting as a support. Once it comes out of here, it acts as a support. And it's always important to keep those lines drawn out. You never want to see people, they think that they can just kind of like take a pattern and then just use that one pattern and then play off of that one pattern, when in reality, you have to take into account every pattern that has really formed over the overall trend, so you're aware of potential support and resistance levels, and it gives you an idea of where price levels could either hit high or low. And in my opinion, it's important to keep this flag drawn out because it has so much statistical data back behind it, being the fact that it's formed over 3 months. So I would not discredit this flag 100%. It has a lot of data to it. It has a lot of numbers backing it, and in my opinion, that's extremely important to keep note of. So somebody just super chatted Encash. Everybody wants to talk about Encash. I think Encash, in my opinion, so far from what I've seen from it, I think it's a good coin to hold. Obviously, it's getting a lot of hype. And I'll tell you what, anytime you see hype with any coin, you typically see some sort of upside, some sort of pump. And obviously, you can see volume is starting to increase here. MACD is starting to soar through the roof. RSI is completely oversold in the 4-hour. If we were to pull up the 1-day, you can see here, there's not as much data to really tell where prices are headed. But in my opinion, we're definitely going to see some sort of a pump. Here's what I'll tell you. If you're playing Encash, if you want to get in on it, you're more than welcome to, but as soon as you start seeing higher highs, in my opinion, that's when you want to start taking your profits. Don't let this become another Tron, right? That's sometimes what happens when something gets a lot of hype. Encash is a great coin fundamentally. It has a really good team behind it. I was looking at all of their projects. I was looking at what their concept of decentralization is, and in my opinion, they have a good team, just like a lot of other projects like VeChain, right? VeChain is a great project as well. It's seeing some upside. But in my opinion, sometimes things get really hyped up. They get really overvalued. If you pull up coin market cap, you can see here what's happening here with Encash. If we'll pull up coin market cap here, go ahead, pull up Encash. We're over 17% in Satoshi valuation in an upside, while the market in general is currently down. So in my opinion, it's obviously seeing attention. It's getting that pump. But is it going to continue to run up and stay up? That's really the question that people have to ask themselves. I think it'll definitely go up. Whether it's going to stay up or not, in my opinion, you want to be very careful with a coin that sees this much upside and this much attention, because it's seeing quite a bit of it. But it doesn't mean you can't make money off of it, right? You can get your position in now, just like Tron. Tons of people made tons of money in Tron, but a lot of people lost money too. So you have to be careful in that aspect when trading coins that have this sort of upside. So somebody says, is there a night owl tonight? Anthony Garrity. Yes, we're going to have a Ruby and above mastermind. Brandon Lieber. Why am I no longer a mod on here? I don't know. Why have you not attended any of our live streams over the past month, brother? You'll probably have to send me a message, man. We'll have to talk and, you know, settle that one out. Somebody says, could you do LTC? Yes, we will be looking at Litecoin as well. Let's go ahead and pull up LTC. Any other requests, by the way? We got Encash. We got Bitcoin. Encash, there's not much technicals. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because it's more of a fundamental coin that I would look at. It's not necessarily something that has enough data to back it since it's such a new coin. But coins like Litecoin, of course, we can go back into, you know, history and really start interpreting the data that's actually provided there. So sometimes you have to make sure that these coins that just come out into the market aren't necessarily being played upon technical analysis, but more so being played upon fundamental analysis. Because I think some people, they take too much pride into their technical analysis, when in reality, you have to look at fundamentals when it comes to coins that either just come onto the market or coins that have that sort of fundamental aspect to them. Like I would say even like DGD, for example, has a fundamental aspect to it in which you have to look at its actual intrinsic value, right? But at the end of the day, we are in a speculative market. We're not in the stock market where it's been established for decades and decades and decades. This is a market in which it's so new, people are speculating, and that speculation is what's causing an increase in prices for all of these coins. So I would highly recommend being careful in that regard. Somebody says, Galtham, Joe T, you got to relax, man. We can't have that, brother. So he says, I think he meant interpret. I probably did. Angelo said credits. BNB, please. Coin burn got pushed back to April. That's interesting. Yes. I know that coin burn is coming out. If you guys don't know what the BNB coin burn, for the past 2 coin burns that have occurred with BNB, the price levels have soared exponentially because of the fact that they're going to burn coins, which limits supply, and price is always based upon supply and demand. So look forward to that in April. Somebody says, great lesson. Thank you, Julius Caesar. I like that name. Very, very formal there. Somebody says XRP explanation. Sorry if you already discussed, but why does XRP value go down but BTC value not as volatile? Nicholas Smith. Well, XRP, just like Encash, right? It had all of this hype. When you see a coin that has hype, you have to be careful with where you keep your money, because I understand some people want to be long-term investors in this market, but in my opinion, a long-term investor in this market doesn't have to put themselves in a position where they're going to be negative in their portfolio if they know they can prevent it by setting up proper stop losses and risk management techniques. And one of those is allocating your assets properly. But in my opinion, we need to wait for Bitcoin to find some strength on the side of, the bulls, for it to go ahead and be a coin that can be confidently invested in terms of long-term potential. Because at this point, we're in this phase where if Bitcoin does not go ahead and rally past 12, it's really going to show some downside over the next couple of months. And there's a lot of factors that have to do with that. And it doesn't mean that I'm not bearish or bullish about the market right now. I'm more so bullish on the long term, but in the short term, there's so many factors that play in part here. One of them is the hedge funds that have been coming out. If you guys don't know, hundreds of hedge funds are starting to be incorporated here and solely focused on cryptocurrencies. And what's happening is you've got all of these individuals and these big investors, right? Doctors and lawyers that have all of this capital to invest, and they want to preserve their wealth. So they're willing to diversify because they don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years or 20 years in the US dollar or any of that. So they want to make sure they have a stake in everything, right? So they're going to put some money in hedge funds that are focused on cryptocurrencies. But when they get their report and they see that they're 20% down, and they're not used to that because you don't see that in the stock market, they might go ahead and say, hey, I want to sell all of my assets in that. I want to take my money back. And then those hedge funds are now forced to sell. So that's something that wasn't in play, a year ago, but is now in play in this market. There's other factors like the futures, right? You look at futures where you're betting against Bitcoin, or you look at margin trading, you're shorting Bitcoin. So now there's all of these other factors playing in part here, which is why I think we're seeing this type of price action in the beginning of 2018. Obviously for Q1, it hasn't been the best quarter, but I think Q2, Q3, Q4 could really be the quarters where we start seeing some sort of upside, being the fact that Bitcoin has been oversold over the past couple of months. And at this point, Bitcoin fundamentally has not changed, right? The blockchain is still there. The blockchain is there. The blockchain is still in high demand. Transaction speeds are not the best, but they are obviously, working on that with the Lightning Network and other implementations that can hopefully go ahead and improve that. But in my opinion, fundamentally, Bitcoin hasn't changed. I think it's just the things surrounding Bitcoin that have really influenced the price in Q1, which in Q2, Q3, Q4, I can see a little bit more upside, being the fact that you're not going to have as much of this uncertainty, and people are going to be more certain of how these other factors are going to play in part towards Bitcoin, like having futures, having margins, having hedge funds, and things of that nature. So another thing is what the SEC just announced, right? They said that they're going to pretty much order all of these exchanges to delist anything that's considered a security if it's not registered with the SEC. Now, the issue with that is there's a lot of coins that are going to be issued as a security because of the principles of how securities are determined through the Howey test, right? And if you look at Bitcoin, that's one of the coins that most likely won't be deemed a security because it just doesn't pass the Howey test. It doesn't go through the criteria to be considered a security. So I think there's going to be a lot of confidence in Bitcoin. So I think fundamentally Bitcoin is actually getting better and better, right? Now understand this as well. I talked about this about a couple months ago. 8 to 12 months is really where I see institutional money coming into the market. And I think the reason I said 8 to 12 months, now that I'm really coming into more of a concrete understanding, is the fact that regulation needs to come into this market for institutional investors and whales, quote unquote, to really be confident in keeping their money in Bitcoin, let alone putting their money in Bitcoin. So I think that's really where we're starting to see more of this transition, more of this maturity in Bitcoin and the whole market in general. And I think we're really going to see a lot of changes in Q2 and 3, but I think those changes are all going to be good for the long-term future of Bitcoin, which in my opinion is a world of mass adoption, right? That's really what we're looking for. December was an amazing run. I think December was awesome because it showed us the potential that Bitcoin has rather than just, a huge pump. So somebody says the government created Bitcoin. Naeem. Oh man, Joe, you've got to relax, brother. My gosh. All this controversy. All this controversy, man. Somebody says Neo. Somebody says day trading and scalping both same. Does anyone have free ONT? They're just trying to get an airdrop on the live chat. These airdrops, man. You know what's cool about airdrops? Airdrops almost are a way for coins to not be deemed as securities, right? If a coin is not going to raise funds, but it's going to have an airdrop and they release the coins to the consumers, eventually those coins, if they go ahead and rise in value, but they were first they were first created as they were first given out as an airdrop, that also could play in part in coins not being deemed a security in certain regards, right? There's other aspects of the Howey test that have to be in place, but that's one factor here. People ask why these companies giving airdrops all the time. Well, there's a lot of reasons why, and one of those reasons is not raising funds allows them to almost bypass that quote-unquote securities Howey tests criteria in order to go ahead and not be deemed a security, just like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin at first wasn't a storage of value, right? Like when I got into Bitcoin, I'll tell you this, around 2010, Bitcoin to me wasn't something to hold. Bitcoin was something that was almost this middle play, right? It was something to get money to somebody else, and it was what we used to get the money there, right? I remember accepting payments in Bitcoin, and I would literally just use the Bitcoin to withdraw my funds in US dollar, and once I had my US dollars, whatever Bitcoin was left in my wallet, just for whatever reason, I wouldn't really pay attention to it as something that I wanted to hold, because it was almost like having extra change, right? And understand that's the completely opposite mindset of what we have now, because it's almost like the mindset I had previously, and what most people had around 2010, 2012, 2013, and 14 is really where things started to shift and people started to realize the intrinsic value of it. But in 2010, it was more so a currency, right? And when you use a currency, your mindset with any currency is different, right? A currency is something that over time eventually gets devalued, right? It slowly devalues. And that's why you're willing to go ahead and use it to purchase groceries, purchase a car, purchase whatever you might want to buy, versus right now with Bitcoin, people don't necessarily want to use as much of it because they know it can possibly go up in value. So why give up something that could eventually go up in value, right? Why spend a Bitcoin on a Lamborghini when that Bitcoin could eventually buy you 10? So that mindset, that shift was really apparent around 2013 and 14 when Bitcoin started hitting these higher levels. And I think that's really where people started to realize the intrinsic value of it. And that's why it passes the Howey test. It's because when it started, it was never to raise funds. It was never an investment opportunity for anyone, right? It was just a peer-to-peer currency that was created in order to exchange from one to another. And that eventually turned into the storage of value as the blockchain got congested and it got in higher demand and things of that nature, which obviously increased the value. So somebody says, smash up those likes. Somebody says, what are your thoughts on Tron's test net versus mainnet? That's a huge conversation, Vincent. But to be honest with you, I haven't looked much into their test net and what they're trying to accomplish. So I don't want to speak about something I'm not as confident in. Somebody says, got a ton of LTC, getting sleepy. You going to get it to us soon, Noel? Man, y'all are feisty today. Gosh. So we're looking at LTC here. And looking at LTC, you can see we've got several different levels to watch. We'll go ahead and draw some new support levels here. You can see we've got this rounding cup here that formed. It looks like we came out of an initial breakout, finding support right here, right along. Looks to be right at 1.8 million Satoshis. And now we're seeing a little bit of that run up that occurred recently, which actually brought the price all the way up to around 2 million Satoshis. Seeing some consolidation now. It looks like with Litecoin, in my opinion, seeing a little bit of strength. You can see overall, we've got an ascending support line here forming. If you actually draw this out from here, you can see this trend is starting to form here where it's actually ascending. And I think if we can start seeing a little bit of further upside here in this MACD as well to start to cross back over to this side, I think that's going to be the most positive thing for Litecoin. If we pull up the one-day chart here as well, looking at Litecoin here, you can see there's a little bit of sell volume, but I don't think it's enough in the histogram to really deem it as something that's going to become oversold over the next couple of days. I think it's going to see a little bit of further upside, being the fact that if you look at the RSI as well, we're also over 40 here. So looking at RSI, this is right the level that I would be watching for. So anything under that would be more of a bearish RSI level. So I think being the fact that we're above that right now, that's more bullish. And then looking at overall price levels and volume as well, you can see we had a little bit of a spike of buy volume recently. And remember, this is the one-day chart. So if you can look at the current volume, it's obviously declined. However, with RSI still over 40, and you can see the MACD is not necessarily going under anymore. It's actually finding support along the neutral zone here, which is pretty much the 0, right? So you pretty much have these different points where it goes from 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 4, 5, 6, all the way back down here. You can see we found support right along 0.2 and then went and zipped right back up. So what the ideal scenario would be here, you can see as soon as we went and hit this level, we started to go back up, just like we did here, where we eventually swung back. So I'm expecting the MACD to also, that fast length, to go ahead and start to swing back, finding support again at this 2. And the one thing I'd be watching for with the MACD is to see, are we going to cross this level here? Because this kind of acting as a zone of barrier where we're not going to see any sort of major sell-off as long as it doesn't go ahead and cross that mark. So I think it's going to be a pretty easy trade here. I don't see much strength or any sort of indicators of strength, but I certainly don't see too much bearish indicators as well. I think the Litecoin price in Satoshi value right now is fairly strong, and you can see we've had quite a bit of quick run-ups here. You've had these support levels maintain themselves for quite a while now, all the way since December, all the way until now. It's stayed at these higher highs, and in my opinion, that's a really good thing for Litecoin, especially when we saw this breakout all the way up here, because in Satoshi valuation, that was actually a lot different than what we saw with LTC USD, where when you look at the USD chart, it looks a lot different because we had an all-time high right over here, and I think that hit right around $360. Now seeing a little bit of consolidation, so it's a completely different chart. But in my opinion, it's still a chart that you can pretty much look at it and say, well, RSI, as you can see, bounced right off of 40. Check this out. This is why I talk about the RSI at 40. Look how we bounced right on there. So don't think of that as like an imaginary line. That is an actual level of trend right there. If it goes under 40, you can assume that we're going to see further downside and most likely bottom out. That's why here we found support at 40. We finally broke it, and that initiated the downtrend all the way back down. So that's where you start seeing things get oversold. And in my opinion, that's actually a really good place to buy, right? If it does break 40, you want to wait for it to go ahead and break 30. And at that point, that's the position of entry so that you can go ahead and ride the wave back up, right? Buying the red, selling the green. Another thing you can do is look for ascending RSI levels. So you can see here as well, this RSI support continues to ascend. So you can see 1 right here, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 points of ascent, and that right there is a bullish trend. So overall with Litecoin, I'm still holding my Litecoin personally. I had purchased some Litecoin right around these levels, and I'm still very bullish on it. I expect this to start to run up. In my opinion, we'll test these all-time highs. And once we test those all-time highs, I think we'll eventually break through. I don't think it's seen as bad of a consolidation as Bitcoin. I think it's showing strength in that manner. And in my opinion, it still has a lot of further upside. Not only that, if you look at volume over the past 24 hours for Litecoin, and you constantly look at the volume for Litecoin, it's always extremely high in terms of ratio compared to its total market cap. So if you look at its volume here, 572 million versus Bitcoin Cash, which has a higher market cap but less volume over the past 24 hours. So in my opinion, because the volume is so high for Litecoin, that means it's being used more. I think it has that intrinsic aspect to it in which a lot of exchanges do accept Litecoin because it's been around for so long. I mean, I remember Litecoin back when Bitcoin was around. It was another coin that was there. It's just not something that many people used, unless it was almost like, I wouldn't call it a novelty, but it was an alternative to Bitcoin, right? It's the silver to Bitcoin. And that's why it has so much adoption. And you can see even here with Ripple, 355 billion in volume in the past 24 hours with a $31 billion market cap versus a $10 billion market cap and $572 million. So in my opinion, that's stout compared to all of these other coins. Ratios, in my opinion, if Litecoin were to go ahead and go up in value in terms of and it kept its ratio of volume to market cap, in my opinion, that would push Litecoin to the top 3 instead of staying there in the top 5. And I think that's really what we want to see over the next couple of months, is to see that volume starting to increase and that market cap starting to increase consecutively, and keeping that ratio there where it's a high ratio of use. So somebody says, word, is that Encash has a sketchy site? Joe T. Encash is an awesome project. If you really look into it, I would definitely do it. I mean, the thing is, with all the hype, you know, like if I were to invest in it as something long term, it's not something I would put a position in now and hold long term. It's a position that I would put in and set up a laddering method out. If you guys know how to play breakouts, I'll teach you right now. Anytime you have a breakout, you want to ladder your way out. So like with Litecoin, once we had that breakout, as soon as you see this influx of volume, that kind of initiates in your mind that we're going to see some sort of an upside. And that's how I've been able to actually call these trade alerts. If you guys are getting our trade alerts, you guys know we had these 2 last trade alerts. Both of them resulted, I think, in over 30% profits. This one was like over 50% profits. And the reason I was able to look at that is because you could tell here, well, this one was a little bit different, in which the RSI was actually heading up and the MACD crossed over. And that's kind of how I realized this was going up. So as soon as we posted this, pretty much within hours, it had a huge run up and it stayed in its take profit zone, because understand, these are technical analysis trade alerts that we post. So you can see we're still in the take profit zone, and then ARN was a little bit different. The reason I called this one is we saw an increase in volume. So I went ahead and initiated that buy zone, because it made me predict the fact that, okay, if we saw this influx of volume, we're most likely to see more volume. And then eventually you can see how as soon as we posted that trade alert, it popped up about 30% in that take profit zone. And you can see the wick stayed up there, eventually consolidating, which is why we have those take profit zones, because you want to take your profits. If you don't take your profits, you would be at a negative entry right now. So if you would have bought here, not sold there, you would be negative, versus taking profits and then seeing lower downside and then waiting for another indicator of another push up. That's how you trade, right? That's how you come out with those 30, 40, 50% profits. It's when you go ahead and take your profits, not leave your money in a coin that goes up and then you're like, okay, it's going to go higher. That's called greed, and you don't want to be greedy in this market. And if you look at this coin here with Litecoin, you can see if we were to take profits and ladder our way out, as soon as we see that breakout, you can sell 20% here, sell 20% here, hold shift here. Somebody recommended that. Hold shift there, 20% there, 20% here, and then ladder your way out, right? So that by the time it consolidates, you already have your position out and you've taken your profits and you've made your money. And that's how you pay yourself in this market, right? Understand that if you don't ever pay yourself in this market, you're always going to be in some sort of, you know, I would call it uncertainty, because you don't know what your exit is. And at that point, all you're going to be focused on is the current market health. And you want to focus on future market health. You want to focus on the fact that, okay, if the market's red right now, it's most likely going to turn green. The question is, when is it going to turn green? And when it does turn green, take your profits. Don't just leave your profits there. So hopefully that helps out. Somebody said, OST, big weeks coming up. What requests do y'all have here? Let's take some requests. Somebody said, hey, Naeem, love your channel. I am in Discord too. I love hanging out there, listening to traders and getting the perspective. That is awesome, Umar. Shout out to Umar Ijaz. Awesome feedback. HCarve007 said EOS. Let's see. Matthew said, got any tips for a TRX holder who's now lost half his money? We can get into that. Jonathan Alfonso said Neo. Joe said EOS. Dragon said Deep Onion. Yanni said, so you laughed at my prediction. Let's see what she said. Yanni, or he, you spent 5 minutes last night laughing at my prediction last night, saying Bitcoin would hit 10K and then fall, but I ended up being right and I made 20% profit. Who's laughing now? Well, I'll actually go and show you exactly what really did happen here, because we'll go ahead and pull up this 4-hour chart, Yanni. Nothing against you. I mean, I don't know if you're taking it personally or anything. I hope not. But what I'll tell you is, you can see when price levels went up here, they never really hit 10,000. You can see right around 9,800 was like the highest we hit, or 9,900, but 10,000 wasn't the level. So I don't know what you're talking about, but 10,000 never acted as any sort of resistance for Bitcoin. It still hasn't. So I think you're just trying to assume that you were right and trying to come up with any possible way to say that, because it never hit 10,000. I never saw any exchange at 10,000 when Bitcoin had that run up. So I might be wrong. If you're looking at Korean exchanges, you might be right. But in terms of my GDAX, it never saw 10,000. So I don't know what you're talking about, but hopefully you're not taking this personally. I'm just saying, my prediction is 10,000 never has been something to watch for Bitcoin, because it pretty much either goes through it or it doesn't really see any sort of overall resistance there, right? In my opinion, Bitcoin will see resistance based upon Fibonacci retracements, based upon either I would call Bollinger Bands as well as potential resistance levels, but more so RSI, Fibonacci retracements, and even looking at the MACD, looking at the histogram, seeing when something's oversold or overbought. I don't necessarily like to look at price levels, right? Because some big events can act as resistance, but for the most part, what you'll find is looking at technical charts, looking at technical indicators are more so better to that. Somebody says, Naeem, how do you set up? How do I set up what? Somebody says, Bitcoin is rigid. Emin said, hey Naeem, thanks for starting the stream earlier. Really helps out with us US Coast or East Coast folks. Yeah, for sure. We're definitely trying to get those East Coast folks happier. I know live streams get kind of late. Somebody says, I missed it. Somebody says, just admit you are wrong. I admit that I'm wrong all the time. I'm just saying, I mean, if you believe that, that's your perspective. Go ahead, start your own live stream. Talk about your perspective, right? It's good to get different perspectives. That's my opinion. Somebody says, your name, serious question. How should I tell my dad that? No, that's ridiculous, F Google. Somebody says, Naeem, IOST. So I saw EOS twice. Let's actually pull up EOS BTC. Take a look at that chart. I saw somebody on Twitch, HCarve said it, and then somebody else also mentioned it. So let's go ahead and check it out. Somebody said, East Coaster here, HCarve. Awesome. Large Bud said, thanks for telling me about HST. I'm holding this long term. Good for you, brother. That's awesome. Somebody says, select the appropriate timeline is the most difficult part of TA. That needs to be the easiest part for you. There's not a specific time frame you want to look at. Remember, you want to go from the 1 day, and I'd say zoom in from there, right? Like when I set up these trade alerts for everyone, I set them up on the 4-hour chart because they're swing trades and they're typically going to last 2 to 6 days, sometimes a little bit longer, but these swing trades are fairly fast, so the 4-hour chart's perfect, right? It's not too far in, it's not too far out, but looking at a 1-day chart for a trade alert probably wouldn't be as feasible, and then looking at a 1-hour chart would be a little bit too much in my opinion. Sometimes I do the 1 hour if it's something that's going to see some sort of immediate upside or potential immediate upside. So you can pretty much predict strength. When you see strength in something, it gives you a feeling of, okay, I know this is going to go up. The question is, how far is it going to go up? And that's why I say set your take profit zones 8 to 12% up, and then you can even set it up a little bit higher, but there's also a risk and reward, right? So you also want to determine what is your potential loss, what is your potential risk, and what is your potential reward. And you always want to make sure your reward has higher upside and you have higher reward potential than risk, because the more reward potential, the more of a safer trade it is. And you never want to trade uncertainty, right? Uncertain trades typically lead to losses or minimal gains, right? You want to trade strength. When you see strength, you trade into it so that you can take advantage of the strength. That's why volume is such a good indicator. And looking at this EOS chart, you can see this huge spike of sell volume, which in my opinion isn't good for EOS. However, remember, it doesn't mean that when prices are low, it's a bad time to get in. It's actually sometimes the best time to get in. And looking at RSI, EOS obviously looks extremely oversold. RSI is actually at 24 right now. In my opinion, EOS at this point, if you were to start dollar cost averaging your position in, that would probably be the smartest move for EOS. So I say EOS is a great trade right now. We actually drew out these levels of dollar cost averaging on the previous live stream, and I highly recommend to continue that strategy because in my opinion, the last resort here, which is the support right around 54,000 Satoshis, is where we're most likely going to either head to or see some sort of extreme run up, heading towards that price level. And EOS for me is a long-term project, right? EOS has a great platform, a great team behind it. You look at, what they're creating. They're eventually right now transitioning from the ERC20 into their own native blockchain. And in my opinion, they have some sort of value to them that a lot of coins don't have, right? They have 21 centralized nodes that allow EOS to be extremely fast. Now, it's not going to be as decentralized. There's going to be less consensus, but overall, that could be used in other areas like supply and logistics where you need some sort of speed, right? Versus having something that's decentralized completely with decentralized nodes, that also hinders the speed, right? It's almost like the dial-up of the internet is like we're right now in the dial-up of blockchain, right? It's just really slow. That's why decentralized exchanges won't necessarily be any sort of thing until they can increase their speeds, right? Until they can increase their speeds, you're going to see exchanges like Binance become more prominent. And I think Binance, and this is kind of why I like the BNB token, which I still would consider holding, because the coin burn coming up in April is definitely going to make the BNB token most likely rise in value as the past two did. However, I think Binance in general is almost like the AOL, right? It's like the AOL from back in the dial-up days where you had, these different online service providers. Now you have these exchanges that are allowing you to trade all of these coins, allowing these ICOs to be listed onto there for individuals like you and I to trade. So the BNB token has that intrinsic value in which people are going to use it to lower transaction costs. And in my opinion, that intrinsic value is there, and it's going to go ahead and build upon itself as more people sign up to Binance and you see the user base grow to levels of, higher numbers, obviously. So somebody says, TRX cops so much SHIT. Somebody says, hey, I watched a video with Richard Hart and the new CFD coin. What are your thoughts on this, if you please? Ron, I haven't seen too much about the CFD coin, unfortunately. Sorry. Jonathan said, Neo. Somebody says, how do you feel about Crypto Staker's steep drop by the end of this week? Crypto Staker has a very, very strong opinion that Bitcoin's going to hit 6,000. So, that's his opinion. And I mean, I would say he's been fairly accurate in the past. I would say just continue to watch it day by day. I think there's still those very important support levels to watch right now. I think the most important support level is like right around 8,200. At that point, we know that it's going to most likely see further downside if it breaks. But I also think that you can still dollar cost your position out if you see it break, I'd say 9,100, because at 9,100, I think at that point you're going to see more and more sell-off because people are going to be worried that it is going to start heading towards that 8,000 level. And in my opinion, you shouldn't be trading your full asset capital right now. Like you want to limit that to 30 to 40% when the market is uncertain, because you want to use that 30 to 40% to make the type of profits that are possible with that 30 to 40%, but not necessarily have all of your money in the market, because if the market, number one, takes a steep dive down, that money is going to be helpful to either go ahead and help you break even, regain your losses, or go ahead and make even more profits if you play everything correctly. So I think that's kind of the mindset people should have right now. It's having fiat and cash on the side is important, but you also still want to go ahead and take advantage of quick swings, right? Like these two trade alerts, if you looked at Trig, when we posted this trade alert, we had, I think somebody made, I think somebody commented on there that they made 50% or something. Did somebody say 65%? Somebody says right on time, perfect. Somebody says, wow, I'm out. Thanks, Naeem. Glad I jumped in when I was told to. Somebody said, holy SHIT. Man, people freaked out from that huge pop. Somebody says, great call. Yes. I think Binance had to disable withdrawals on this because it was like so volatile and they issued this like announcement. But understand, this stuff is predictable, right? Like you look at these indicators, the buy volume was starting to increase in the histogram. All the RSI was determining that it broke resistance. It was going to start shooting back up over 70, which obviously eventually did, and then it saw that consolidation. So it's predictable. Indicators help so much, and I highly recommend it. So I would say EOS at this point, dollar cost average, just based on the fact that RSI is starting to dip. And if you look at the MACD too, here's another reason I say EOS is a good buy right now. And you can see it's starting to curve, and you're starting to see sellers drop off. Look at this, descending convergence there. So this histogram right here is showing you these sellers are starting to drop off, and we're most likely going to see a buying trend now, because obviously it's going to follow this trend. And sellers can pretty much be wicked out of the market, right? They're not unlimited. They're limited, right? There's not going to be an unlimited amount of sellers. People will sell once they feel market sentiment is to sell, but eventually that runs out, and then people are like, okay, now I can buy, right? And that's why you see the MACD starting to curve. So I think EOS is going to be a great move sometime soon, especially in Satoshi value. That can definitely go ahead and get you some more Satoshis, and it really looks poised for a big breakout. If you look at the Bollinger Bands, it's all the way in the bottom right now, so it could eventually start heading to the top. It actually stayed at the bottom for quite a bit now, so I see all signs of being oversold. In my opinion, I would start dollar cost averaging. That's really the best move. Anytime you know something's going to potentially break out, dollar cost averaging is always the best way to get in and out, because that allows you to average your position and not have either the highest price or the lowest price. So hopefully that helps. What other requests do we got before we head over to our mastermind tonight and talk about how to play this market while we're seeing this sort of horizontal movement around 9,000? Somebody says, starting to bug me. Somebody says, you should do a live stream with Ivan on Tech sometime. Mike Wiley. Ivan on Tech is a great YouTube channel. A lot of good fundamental analysis there. I like how he really goes out of his way to, get near people that have some sort of credibility in the market, so he can get really good information. And I love watching stuff like that, because you always want to get your information from the source. You never want to go to like an intermediary or a middleman, right? Somebody says BTC creeping up. Leandro, rigged by margin trading. Totally manipulated when volume is low. Beware. Somebody says, I think we should start to consider the possibility that this is a bear market. Maybe going down sub 5,000 levels for possibly years until the tech becomes mainstream. All the signs are bad. Interesting perspective, and that could certainly be the case. Like I said, with all of this uncertainty and all these new aspects of the market emerging, like hedge funds, futures, margin trading, shorting, all that is going to influence Bitcoin, right? You look at MT Gox, that's something that's been under the rug for so long. People knew that MT Gox was going to have to eventually liquidate funds to go ahead and pay back its investors. So it's not a surprise that they started doing it, right? I think that it's just something that eventually had to come out from under the rug so that eventually Bitcoin can now see its prosperity, because there's all this stuff that's just kind of stuck in this underground area where it just needs to kind of percolate itself and start zipping its way out so that we can start seeing more trust in the technology behind Bitcoin. So it's still a very, very intrinsically valuable asset, in my opinion. It fundamentally has all the aspects it's always had, and nothing has changed. I think only the things surrounding it have changed. Somebody says, Naeem, if you were to start your own coin, what would you call it and what would it be used for? Joe T. That's a really good question. I think, one thing for me, getting into this market, it's really, to me, it's quite revolutionary to know that I can send money to somebody in the Philippines or in Thailand or any of these other countries in the world and not necessarily have to pay bank wire fees or even have to necessarily go through a middleman, right? Like theoretically, you could almost avoid a middleman if you were to just send a transaction through a network that didn't have any sort of intermediary. And in my opinion, that right there is one of the most fascinating things about this technology. And I think that's the one thing that the technology is going to be used for first before seeing any sort of other development, right? Obviously, the blockchain in general, the technology of blockchain is so revolutionary in the fact that it has so much strength and it has so much power to it. It has consensus behind it. It has all of these aspects that we never really had, or we really lacked in traditional modern networks, right? Where you had some sort of hierarchy, and now everything is decentralized, spread upon the masses. And in my opinion, it gives more consensus to people like you and I, which creates more of this equality. And not that equality is always a good thing, but I think that it's a good thing where there's consensus and we can find out what the majority wants, right? Because that's what's going to typically be, I wouldn't say the right thing, but the thing that will best suit that sort of scenario. So like, for example, like where do we put all of our medical funds, right? This would be a cool ICO. You have all of these like different lobbyists, right? They funnel money towards certain things that they want, right? But what if we had some sort of decentralized economy in which these funds, instead of having lobbyists determine where it goes, we can determine where it goes, and we can say, hey, I want these funds to go towards finding a cure to cancer, or I want these funds towards, look at the tobacco industry, for example, right? So many different lobbyists within that industry. Look at farming. So many lobbyists that control where funds are at and where they go, especially in medicine, right? So I think it'd be cool to have more of that community consensus of where funds should go, rather than having it being lobbied upon and being manipulated, right, by the big dogs, I guess you can call it. Somebody says, volume, please. Test, test. Somebody says, whoa, that's deep. Yeah, we can get deep. Somebody says, that's called Billcoin. Is there a mastermind tonight? Yes, we do have a mastermind coming up tonight. So let's pull out from EOS and head over to BTC USD here. And just kind of finalize some things there. Now, another coin that we definitely want to look at right now is XRP. I know that is a coin that a lot of people are either holding or wondering about. And it's making some interesting patterns here. We saw this contracting falling wedge forming. This is a market cycle that we drew out before. And we're seeing these price levels starting to decline, obviously, right up around that resistance level. If we actually zoom in, we can get a better view. Well, first and foremost, let's pull up the RSI. You see we're finding some support right along that 40, which if we cross under, in my opinion, that's where we're going to start to see some sort of bearish signs here. And if you look at the MACD, we're still heading up. However, the buy volume, in my opinion, is not necessarily where we want it to be, right? You look at the buy volume here, not necessarily there. And you look at this histogram, the buyers are lacking. We had more buyers here than we had here. And I don't think we saw enough downside here with the histogram with sellers. So you can see it's starting to curve back a little bit. Is it going to curve back? I think the one thing to watch here is going to be the RSI, because it's more of a momentum oscillator where you're measuring the speed and direction, and it's more up to date. So if we can see that cross 40, we can also assume the MACD is going to curve down, in which the price levels will also go down. And if we go into a 4-hour chart to look at more of these closer prices, you can see we're testing this support level here as well that was formed earlier in the week, which was right around 82,000 Satoshis. And now that we're heading back towards that support line, in my opinion, if we can break that, we head back down to this level here, which is 77,000 Satoshis. And at that level, that's pretty much a huge bottom here for Ripple, because we haven't really seen lower lows. And I think that would really bring us as close to the apex as possible, in which we can finally see that breakout, being the fact that if RSI does start to dip below 40 and that price starts to go down below these support levels, RSI will definitely be oversold. And I think that's really when we'll see some sort of an upside for Ripple. So at this point, I wouldn't necessarily call it a coin that could potentially have a breakout right now. I think it's a coin right now that's still in its uncertain phase, because of the fact that the RSI is right at 40. We don't know if it's going to cross down or start to see some sort of support and bounce back up. If it starts to bounce up and past 42, I think that would be really the initiation of a buy, being the fact that it'll most likely start to head back up towards that 70 and then go to those oversold levels. So you can see once we bounced that first time, we went all the way back up here to around 55 until we saw that consolidation. That brought prices very low, went under 30, and then you can see how we went finally right over that, now seeing some potential support at 40, but we might drop below. And I definitely wouldn't consider this too much of a long-term hold as well. That's just a personal opinion. Somebody says, got any tips for a TRX holder? Somebody says, will you give away 4 Litecoin for 500 likes? Yes, we'll do that. 4 Litecoin, how much US dollar is that? That's like $1,000. You're gonna see likes shoot up. We'll do a giveaway for sure. We'll do a book giveaway. I don't think you think we're gonna hit 500 likes today. 445 watching. We might. We'll definitely do a book giveaway. So he says, I would like to buy a Rolex watch if I become a millionaire. Just saying. Which Rolex, Ramsey? Be specific with your goals, brother. Ray Palm said Encash. You missed it, brother. Pax said, love your RSI TA. Now zoom out. Somebody says, I'm interested in Cardano. I originally bought it at 0.19, sold at 0.80, and I think about getting back in. Thoughts? We'd probably have to look at the chart, Night Strike. But I do know we have, what is the other coin that we have to look at? Tron TRX. So let's do TRX BTC just to take a look here. at what's popping here as well. We'll pull up the 4-hour chart and see where prices are headed. We'll draw this resistance and support here. So it looks like we're finding, actually, let's go ahead and do the Binance chart so we can get the rest of the data here. I think we have some stuff drawn out here on the Binance chart. Yeah, we do. So we're still following this contracting falling wedge as well, just like Ripple had. And if you're starting to look at this, you can see with the MACD, we're starting to cross back over. We had some buyers come in, but if we pull up the 1 day and get a better understanding of where that MACD is overall, you can see it's thinning itself out. I think that Tron has seen a large amount of sellers kind of pop out. And at this point, you can see exactly what's happening. MACD is starting to just kind of find that horizontal trend. Not necessarily a good thing. The good thing about it is that's on the downside, which means the only thing we can see from here is upside. But I think it's going to take some time. The one thing I would watch for, though, is you see this little tick of volume here. This could be an indicator that we might start seeing some more buyers coming in. Understand that the only reason that would have happened is because people are realizing that it's becoming oversold, and maybe the rest of this downtrend is just the end of it as we approach the end of this apex. So I think overall with Tron, we've seen quite a bit of sellers come in, and I think somebody mentioned earlier, like, what do I do if I lost half of my money in Tron, and we see it this low? I would say at this point to just hold, because we haven't seen any major run up yet, and I think until we see a major run up would be the best time to get out of that position, not necessarily when it's low, right? You never want to sell low, because how a market works is you're going to see ups and downs, right? So even when markets are manipulated, it's going to go up and down. So there's no point of selling right here if this is where the market's at, when you can eventually sell right up there, right? So this would be the ideal position to sell, right here rather than right here in red. So that's what I would say in terms of Tron. If you're still holding Tron, continue to hold. Obviously sellers have pretty much been weakened out based on this histogram here. And in my opinion, now when we see this horizontal level, because we're on the downside, the next step is going to see some upside. So hopefully we can see more buyers come in. I think we're going to have to see some sort of fundamental aspect of Tron that allows it to see some sort of upside. So somebody says, is there a mastermind? Yes, we are going to be heading over to our mastermind. I know it's a little bit late. Somebody says, look at that. He refuses to zoom out past the daily. Somebody says, there's a bigger picture. If you were a crypto, which crypto would you be? That's a good question. I think if I was a crypto, I would probably choose Stellar. I like Stellar. It's fast. It has a lot of capabilities. It's led by an awesome leader. And I think that potential for Stellar is high. And I think it can have some sort of intrinsic value in 5 to 10 years when we see more adoption, more ICOs on their platform. Somebody said Steam under 30 RSI. Yes, we actually had a successful Steam alert too. We had a Steam trade alert too on Binance where it popped. And you can see on the 4-hour where that happened right here. We saw that initial pop, and that was called out. I think was right around, we had the buy zone at 2600, and then that's when that popped. So I had the wrong chart on the trade alert posted, so that was the actual Binance prices. Somebody says, I have fully manipulated your bot. Good job, Pax. So he says, could we head to the Night Owl? Yes. Let's head over to the Mastermind tonight. We're going to be doing a Ruby and Above Mastermind. Do we have any final questions before we give away this book? We have the Internet of Money to give away, so we're going to be giving that away. Somebody says you were going to check out ADA for me, bro. Nice strike. Let's pull up ADA real quick, brother. We'll get that out of the way. Let's see what's happening with ADA. We'll do a quick analysis here. MACD's crossing up. RSI is upward trend. This is good. Look at that. RSI up. That's actually how we called out this trade. Look at that. RSI was up, and that's where we saw the breakout. So same thing here. RSI is up. Let's look at the volume here on the 1 day. It looks like volume is very low. That's not good. We broke some key support. Let's actually redraw this right here. See how low we're going to go. Bottom of the Bollinger Band. That's also good. Where's the next support? It looks like we're heading towards new support. Doesn't look like we're going to see further upside. Yeah, we're probably going to swing back on this. So Yep, look at that. MACD pointing up. Buyers starting to come in. Very good overall histogram here in terms of sellers weakening. You can see, I like when I see a histogram that's very prolonged like that. To me, that's really good. You don't want to see too many spikes, right? You want to see something that's overall, I would call it a gradual decrease, because what that means is the sellers are gradually going away and it's staying at the levels it's supposed to. So you're seeing normal sell volume. And in my opinion, if you see something that spikes, you don't know where there's other sellers involved. Whereas in this chart, you can see there's obvious histogram decreases as it moves on in the time frame, which is showing that we're soon going to see some sort of upside with the histogram starting to cross back over. Especially if we look at the overall chart here, you can see with the Bollinger Bands, we're heading towards those bottom levels. And in my opinion, based on this 4-hour chart as well, like we just saw, you can see here with this buy volume, we had this huge pop right here. And then you see the RSI curving up. If you pulled out this 1-day chart as well, RSI under 30, very oversold. So all of that good signs for 88 Cardano. RSI about to pop back into that 30. Typically, once you get past 30 from coming under, it'll see some sort of a sharp increase, not necessarily something small. And then you can see this is one failed test, but that right there created that double bottom. So I think that's perfect. Great trade here. Cardano, EOS so far were really good, and I think Tron, we said give it a little bit of time. Macking said, Naeem, hello! Let's do a book giveaway. So here's the question. I want to talk about something that we talked about on the stream already. And the question was, name one aspect of Bitcoin that's present now that wasn't present 1 year ago. So that will be the book giveaway. Somebody says, I would love the book right now. I'm working 6 hours away from home for 3 weeks and would love a good read. Would appreciate it, Naeem. Thanks for everything you do. For sure, Gabriel. Gabriel, you can get a book too, man. Thank you for posting that, brother. Send me a message on Twitter. I'll get you that book. But whoever wins this book has to answer this and the question. So what are some aspects of Bitcoin that are present now that weren't present a year ago that we talked about on the stream? So who was paying attention? So other than SegWit and Lightning. Let's see here. Somebody says Lightning, SegWit, something I talked about. Cheap transactions, that's not present now. It was present back then. They actually used to have these, there was like companies built on tipping creators on like YouTube and other platforms through microtransactions that aren't around anymore because of how expensive it is to make transactions with Bitcoin. Somebody says store of value. Somebody said I bought my wife with Bitcoin at 20,000 a Bitcoin. I got lucky. Market cap, something that I talked about. Man, does nobody know? I'm not seeing anything. Let's see here. Let's scroll down a little bit. Oh, there you go. Now I'm seeing it. Intrinsic value. Obviously that changed. Alex GE said hedge funds. Alex GE, you won, brother. We talked about hedge funds and how hedge funds are now forced sellers in the market that wasn't present years ago when there weren't hedge funds, right? So that's a big factor here because that's where you're going to see large market manipulation. So thank you all for watching, and we're going to be heading over to the Night Owl Snipers. Out.